Okay, so I would like to welcome all participants of this workshop. My name is Alpha Diallo, and I am Senior Research Associate at Regional Center for Energy Policy and Research, which is a Hungarian think tank conducting this project about renewable auctions. And in a couple of minutes, I would like to introduce you the projects and today's agenda. And after that, we can turn our attention toward the interesting presentations my colleagues and external speakers have prepared for you today. So what is important about this project that we are conducting, that this workshop where you are participating now is part of a bigger project. And the main aim of this project is to provide recommendations in terms of implementation and improvement of auction design for the energy community contracting parties, considering European best practices. And this project is relatively short in duration, so it will end in March 2024, and it will consist of three different workshops, and one final report. What is important to highlight that the project is financed by the European Climate Foundation. As I said, the project will consist of three different workshops. The first one is the workshop you are participating here today. And the main topic of this workshop will be the current state of auctions in EU member states. And we will also speak about the current state of auctions in the energy community contracting parties. We try to identify some best practices and challenges the countries are facing. The second workshop will be about innovative solutions in renewable energy auctions. So it will try to list some out of ordinary design elements which can be considered as good practices and may be worth implementing in the energy community contracting parties. The planned date of this second workshop will be in end of January 2024. And there will be also a third workshop which will collect the recommendations on how to implement and efficiently operate renewable auctions. And this workshop will be at somewhere in February, March 2024. The registration for the future workshop will be available at rec.ehu per events. And for all workshops, the registration will be free. And so you can join if you are interested in the other two workshops this project consists of. Also, we will prepare a final report, as I said, with the main findings. This will be a 20-30 page long summary report, and we will make this report available also on rec.hu. Just a couple of words about the project team. So as I said, we are working at Regional Center for Energy Policy and Research, which is a Hungarian think tank working related to electricity market projects, renewable regulation, natural gas market projects. And we have a renewable team at REC working on this project. And this team has quite solid experience with renewable electricity and energy auctions. We participated in the AURES-2 project, which was a really big European project about how to efficiently design auctions and how to operate them. We participated in this project in several case studies, and we also made evaluation for the DG Energy about the current state of European auctions, how they operate, how efficient they are. And we also prepare recommendations. For example, we prepared recommendations for Armenia on implementing the auction. So based on these experiences, we've tried to provide you some good insight about European and energy community contracting parties auctions. And in my final slide, I would like to shortly introduce you today's agenda. So first, there will be a presentation about the current state of EU auctions. Then José Elias Cabrera, from the DG Energy, will present us about the new market design. Then we will, from REC, András Vékony will present about the renewable auctions in the energy community. And then Mr. Alexander Dedinek will go more into the details of the North Macedonian auctions, which can be considered a relative success story in the energy community contracting parties, because several auction rounds were held there, and the event will be closed with a roundtable discussion about the future of auctions in the EU and the energy community countries. And as some last technical informations that I would like to highlight, first, that we are making a recording of this event, which we would like to share in our webpage. So by participation, please note that you are accepting that this recording will be uploaded into the webpage, and there will be an option for anyone to look this workshop to watch it at a later date. And second important issue to highlight, that there will be presentations about energy community contracting parties, but in the data we excluded Ukraine because of the Russian aggression against the country. It's very difficult to gather data about the country, and also, of course, the country now has different priorities than efficiently design renewable auctions, so therefore they will not be present in the slides. But of course, we wish courage for the country in this difficult situation. So with this, I would like to conclude my opening presentation, and now I would like to give the floor to my colleague Bettina Desi, who will speak about the current state of auctions in the EU member states, trends and changes.
Thank you, Alba. And now I share my slides. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, I can hear you.
And thanks for the introduction. I'm Bettina Desi. I'm also working at REC. And my presentation, which will take about like 30 minutes, will cover up what we observed, how the auctions are organized in the European Union member countries, and what are the trends we observed in the last few years. And I will start with a very, very quick introduction of the regulatory and the economic context, because the last few years brought some unexpected factors, so it is just important to mention them when we want to evaluate the performance of auctions. And after that, sorry, I will talk about how the auctions are operated and how they are designed. And I will describe the most important design elements and administrative factors, how they are used in the European countries. And after that, we will talk about the outcomes of the conducted auctions from the last few years. This includes the level of competition and the prices the auctions resulted. And just for a quick outlook, I will talk about the popularity of PPA contracts, because these can be an alternative to auctions, and it's just important to mention them. And I will finish with some conclusions. So let's start with the regulatory context. I'm quite sure that most of you know this quite well, but just to mention it, that in the last few years, since 2019, the European Union implemented the Green Deal, which set the two very important, very holistic goals. The 55% of greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2030 compared to the 1990 levels, and to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. And the Fit for 55 legislation sets the path how to reach these goals. And this package consists of a lot of other sub-packages to support these goals. For example, the Energy Efficiency Directive, the emission trading system and the revision of the emission trading system and the effort sharing regulation and a lot of other packages. And what is important for us now is the renewable energy targets, the renewable energy directives. And as you can see, the goals set by these directives are growing continuously with the revision of these directives. And another very important factor, not just the magnitude of these renewable energy share targets, but so far until the RED II, there were only renewable energy targets for the overall energy consumption and in the electricity sector. But now the revision of the RED II tells that all the member states countries have to set their goals in the other subsectors as well. For example, buildings, heating and cooling sector, and transport. And these sets will be defining the national energy and climate plans. And yes, and another quick introduction of the market environment, market situation, because it's a little bit challenging. In the last few years, that started with the pandemic and became even more volatile because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And these circumstances created very high electricity prices and very high volatility of these prices, which creates a completely different environment for investment because of the high inflation and the high interest rates it brings. Of course, I have to mention that when the prices are high, there's a quicker payback for investments as well. But as you can see on the second picture, these circumstances have an
You're muted, Betty.
Okay, sorry, so I don't know when you lost me, but so with how the market environment changed and what happened with the electricity prices, this with the high inflation rates, high interest rates, and high input cost, and also the high cost of capital, it led to higher SNP numbers. And one thing. Sorry, someone muted. So maybe sorry for the problem. Some technical issues occurred here. So the LTO numbers are now started to grow, which we usually expect to be smaller and smaller over time as the technologies are getting more and more mature. And now the levels, according to the IRENA calculations, they are as high as they were 5 or 6 years ago. So this is also an important thing to consider when we evaluate the performance of auctions. And now let's talk about the auctions themselves. As you can see on the first figure, all the blue countries show the countries which already organized at least one auction round, but most of them regularly operate the auctions as a support tool. And even in the last few years, which were quite interesting economically, more than every year there were new adopters of this scheme. And we know that next year there will also be Romania who plans to organize its first auction round. And there are some countries like Croatia and Estonia, they already started auctions a few years ago, but they started with small-scale auctions, and now they progressed their schemes to large-scale auctions. And of course, there are some countries where we don't really see progress yet, so we don't know their plans exactly. We can't really go into details what's happening in these countries. We only know that their plans are not known yet. And of course, there are some countries where auctions were organized and the scheme was introduced, but now we don't really see that they want to continue it or not. These countries, for example, Denmark or Finland, where we expect that these casual, traditional versions of auctions for ground-mounted PV or onshore wind, they are not expected that they will organize such rounds in the future. And on the second figure, you can see how many rounds these countries organize yearly. And this is for the biggest nature technologies for PV and wind. And we can see that most of the countries organize 1 round per year, but there are a few ones which organize 2 or even 3 or even 4 rounds a year. And let's go forward with the administrative setup and design elements of the auctions. On this slide, you can see 2 of these design elements. The first one is the organizing body, the responsible body for organizing auctions. As you can see, there are a few options. The most common one is the regulatory authority, which is most of the European countries choose this body as a responsible authority, but there are examples where the ministry or the TSO organizes auctions. And the energy agency category is a little bit flexible category. We put every institution which is not the 3 other into this category. But we have to tell that with all our research on auctions, we don't really see any difference or we don't have any clear evidence that any choices would be better than the other. So this is just it's good to decide this institution based on country-specific factors, and then we don't have any rules that any kind of choice is better than the other. And the second figure is about what is the actual auction product, because every auction round has to be defined in something, has to define the limit, what you want to announce on the auction. And most of the cases, the production capacity is auctioned. That is how the magnitude of the auction is defined. So, for example, 1 gigawatt hour of production capacity is announced at a round. But there are some countries where energy volumes are defined. For example, volumes are defined, and there are some countries where budget is announced and how much I want to spend on supporting renewables at a specific auction round. And there are combinations of it. For example, when energy and budget is used at the same time. This was applied in Hungary as well, for example. And this works in a way when one of the limits is reached, then that will be the effective one. So a country or the organizing body can control quite effectively, for example, the budget, how much the country wants to spend on support of renewables. And on the next slide, you can see another very important factor of the auctions. This is called what is the remuneration scheme of the auction. This defines the revenue stream of the investors, of those who actually build this kind of project. And there are 3 very popular versions of these remuneration schemes. One is I define them because I'm not sure if everyone knows the difference between these. The first one is the one-sided sliding premium. This means that as you know, the auctions has an outcome of the bidding price, and if you want, you have this bid price, and you can compare this bid price to the market price. And if the market price is lower than the bid price, then the producers will receive the difference. But if the market price is higher than the bid price, they can keep the excess revenue for themselves. In case of the CFD, it's called a contract for differences, or it's also called as the two-sided sliding premium. If the first situation is the same, so if the market price is lower than the bid price, then the producers are compensated by the difference. But if the market price is higher than the bid price, then they have to pay back the difference back. This means that the investors have a very, very smooth revenue stream over the support period. And the third kind of remuneration scheme is the fixed premium. This means that based on, for example, unit of electricity produced, the producer receives a fixed amount of financial support regardless of the market price. And what we see is that CFD is the most popular choice in Europe. And we don't know anything exactly about the new, in this regard, the new European market design, but there are some rumors that this reform may enhance convergence towards the CFD scheme, that most of the countries should use this scheme, but we don't know anything, any fact or decision about this. And as you can see, there are some alternative schemes on this map. For example, just to mention Portugal. Portugal operates a scheme with two sub-schemes. And the first one is when bidders can choose between a negative price or they can choose from a CFD contract. So that's why we colored it as an alternative scheme. And on the next slide, I talk about these, of course, not anyone or not any company can apply on these auctions. There have to be some filters to target those companies which can actually build these installations, not just to apply with a nice price, but to realize them as it is required. So that's why the countries apply material and financial prequalification criteria in parallel. There are, just to mention, there are some situations where there are so-called pre-selection rounds, but it is not a very common thing, and usually a very technical check of fulfilling some very basic criteria, but it's not a very common thing to apply. These material and financial criteria are a lot more common. And what is important that these criteria helps to filter those companies which will realize the projects in the higher probability. But if we narrow the group of potential bidders too strongly, then it can lead to a less intense competition. So this is an interesting choice, what to prefer, a bigger competition or more or higher realization rates. And I would like to mention first some material criteria. These material criteria are usually associated with the project implementation milestones. We put some examples on the slides. So, for example, you can see that in Germany, in case of onshore wind project, they require environmental permits, or in case of PV installations, the proof of access to the site, or to prove somehow that the project developer has the right to use the land, and the eligibility of the site for ground mounting plants, and quite similar permits are needed in Greece and in Poland. And even in Poland, you can see that not just environmental and building permit, but it is also required to present the schedule of construction works and expenditures. So this is quite detailed plans of how they want to realize the projects. And one interesting thing that there's Denmark on the slide as well. This sounds like a financial criteria, but we categorize it as a material criteria to prove that the financial stability of the company who is applying for support. And there are some countries where the environmental related permits or criteria is getting more and more important. For example, Netherlands, France, and Spain also uses this kind of criteria quite strongly. And what we call financial prequalification criteria is this so-called bid bond, which is usually used as in a form of a bank guarantee. There can be two stages of this, one stage or two stage bid bond. Most of the countries, it's quite mixed how much these countries, the European countries use this. As you can see, half of the countries use one stage only, and half of the countries use two stage. And there is Germany transitioned from two stage to one stage, so it can change. This means that the first stage bid bond means that when the companies apply for support and they make their bids in the auctions, they have to pay a predetermined amount of money. And the second stage bid bonds means that if they already won on the auction, then they have to pay another amount of money. And as you can see on this table, that the prices are really different, and it's really not easy to compare these the countries, because many of the countries define this in different terms. For example, some countries define it based on the capacity of the installation, some based on the expected electricity volumes they will produce. And for example, in Hungary or Italy, it is defined as a percentage of the total investment cost. So it's a little bit hard to compare these, but we calculated, converted all these numbers into euro per kilowatt. So you can see that there are quite different magnitudes of these financial bid bonds, which are required just to participate on these auctions. And these bid bonds are usually linked to some kind of penalties. So if the winning bidders projects, they will not realize at the end of the, according to the support contract, then they lose this money. So they became interested in finalizing the project because otherwise they will lose this money. And on the next slide, I will talk about the technology focus and the appearance of technology innovations on these auctions. On the figure, you can see the colors, that there are different schemes how the auctions can treat different technologies. You can see that there are technology-specific rounds. This means that every technology has their own only one technology competes on an auction round. This means that there's no competition between the technologies, and only one technology is announced. And in case of the technology basket, it's similar, but in parallel, at one round, they can announce different baskets. For example, the whole auction is 1 gigawatt of production capacity, and half of it goes to onshore wind capacities and half of it for photovoltaic installations, and they don't compete with each other. But these two technologies both appear on one round. And the multi-technology auctions where different technologies compete against each other. And as we can see that when the technologies are quite mature, then the competition between technologies is also works quite well. It's these auctions were also quite successful in the last few years. And what is interesting that next to the very traditional onshore wind and photovoltaic installations, there are some innovative technologies appearing on these auctions. Just to name a few, in Portugal, for example, there will be very high amounts of floating PV capacities. And the first auction was very successful for this technology. And the first floating offshore round was also announced in November. We don't know the result of it yet. And another interesting example is that in Luxembourg, they organized their first agrivoltaic auction, and they also announced and organized one round for industrial self-consumption, which is very innovative. We don't know any other countries where such technology is competing on auctions. The first one, the agrivoltaic, is popular. It was already organized in France as well, but this other one is quite new. And another interesting thing is that storage is also appeared on the auctions. And in this term, I'm not talking about storage auctions, but what I'm talking about is when there is a renewable energy production capacity, and there is an obligation to co-locate or to combine it with some storage capacity as well. So, for example, in Hungary, the last auction round, there was an obligation to include 10% storage capacity in proportion to the capacity of the whole installation. And in Germany and in Portugal, a few years ago, they started to call for projects where storage component is included, and also in Spain it was introduced last year. So this is something which seems to be quite important in the future in Europe. And we need to have a quick look at the offshore wind auctions as well, because they are a little bit different from the traditional auctions. That one interesting reason is that not all of the countries can organize these kind of auctions, mostly those near to the seashore who are involved. There are some countries like Denmark and Netherlands where there are huge announced volumes and very fragmented auction rounds. And France, Germany, and Poland also organized quite a lot of rounds. And what we can see that there are a lot of new comers in this field. So more and more countries who are able to would like to organize offshore wind auctions. What is important that these auctions are usually very often single unit or multi-unit auctions, which means that very specific projects are announced. So it is not like not as free as, for example, in case of a PV or offshore wind installation, but there are very, very specific projects announced. And also the group of investors who can apply, it's a lot smaller, because in many cases, it is required, for example, to have some experience with offshore wind projects, which is not a very, very broad group of companies. And as you can see, there are a lot of countries like Spain in the Canary Islands region. Estonia is also, there is an ongoing auction for 2 projects. Greece also has very nice plans on this field. And Belgium and France, they are also freshly adopted offshore wind auctions. And Lithuania is an interesting example, because they also tried this kind of auctions with a negative bid kind of auction, but it seems like they will transition their scheme to CFD scheme. And what we like to mention is negative bid auctions, because for offshore wind it's quite relevant, because these projects, they don't really need financial support. They don't need financial support, but they actually willing to pay for the right to be able to realize this kind of projects. So this negative bid auctions is quite popular in this field. And for offshore wind, there are some auctions became multi-criteria auctions. This means that not only the price is the most important factor for decision making, but for example, in France or Netherlands, price only plays 50% of this decision making criteria. And there are some other criteria like sustainability criteria or integration criteria, how far projects will innovate to match production output to the energy demand. So these other factors became more and more important. And let's start to evaluate the outcomes of the auctions. These figures show of course, in many countries, there are a lot of auction rounds in a year. We try to examine what were the typical subscription rate in these countries, because what these figures about is that competition is measured in the way that we compare the announced volumes at an auction to the total volume of the bids applied for this auction. So if the application was higher than the announced volume, then we called it the auction round oversubscribed. This is marked with green on the figures, and if there were less bids than the announced volume, we call it undersubscribed, so the competition was small. And in those countries where there were a lot of auction rounds, we try to summarize an average for the subscription rate, and that's how we colored the countries. And this map shows the PV auction round. And just to name some, just to mention some examples. For example, in Italy, there are a lot of undersubscribed auctions, both for PV and both for wind. But what is interesting that if they don't award a volume at an auction round, they add it to the next one, and this does not look very good in competition-wise. And for example, you can see that Spain also became red as the time passed. On the maps, they had 2 very, very undersubscribed auction rounds in 2022, and now their plans about continuing new rounds is unknown yet because of these bad experiences. And for example, in Poland, you can see it also became red over the years, because in 2021 and 2022, there were, I guess, as I remember, 5 technology baskets in each auction, and not even all of the baskets were successful, and even the successful baskets were not oversubscribed, so that's why it became red. So you can see that there are some negative stories here. And actually, the story is almost the same. I switched to the wind auction figures. We prepared this with the same methodology. And just to talk about some examples, you can see that the German wind auctions are red in all of the figures. This does not mean that all of the wind rounds were undersubscribed in Germany, but most of them were. And there were, they were undersubscribed, but there weren't any critically low subscription rates. But at most of them, the competition was not very intense. And but we can see that generally the subscription rates, so the level of competition is getting a little bit worse in the last few years. And just to quickly talk about the prices, these prices on the figures are presented for 2020 and for the last 1 or 2 years. Of course, we don't know many results for the auction rounds in 2023. And what we need to do is to correct these numbers with the very, very high inflation rates in the past. So every number price here is presented in 2020 euro values. And it was quite important to do this correction because without inflation correction, the numbers looked quite bad. So what you can see that we marked with light red when the prices increased and with green when the prices decreased, because as time passes, we expect these technologies to be more and more mature, which has to bring some kind of reduction in the prices. But unfortunately, we saw that in many cases, the prices increased even with the corrected inflation. But it was a very, very important step to do this inflation correction, because without it, the picture was very, very negative, with prices increased almost all the time. And there were only a few exceptions where even the nominal price was lower than, for example, in 2020. What you should know about these slides as well, that you can't really compare the countries to each other, only the changes for one specific country, because the remuneration schemes are different for each country. And we always try to compare the biggest size categories, because if, for example, for PV, there are smaller or bigger ones, the large-scale installations, what we counted. And what is behind these kind of these changes we observed is, I mentioned almost all of them, but just to summarize, is that as you can see, the subscription rates and so the level of competition is getting lower in a lot of in case of a lot of countries, and this can be a reason of the uncertain economic atmosphere, which can make the investors to postpone their projects. So we don't really know if this is a long-term effect or just a temporal drop in interest. And I will talk a little bit about the alternatives like the PPA, which can attract a lot of investors instead of auctions. And in my opinion, it can be also an important factor that the high announced volumes can lead to small competition. This means, for example, in case of France, when they had the volumes which were not awarded to the next round. So this, if these volumes are too high, then it can lead to small competition, because the investment sector cannot follow these changes. Or in other cases, when you just when the organizing body only keeps the announced volumes at the same level, it's just not adapting to the uncertain economic environment. So it will result relatively small competition. And there can be, of course, country-specific burdens which are not related to the auction specifically. For example, local administrative issues like licensing or scarcity of grid connection that can discourage the investors. So generally, these factors lead to relatively or smaller participation on the auctions. And this can have a negative effect on prices. And we have to add the very high inflation Europe-wide to the price changes. Also, these, as I mentioned before, these economic uncertainties, this can generally have a price effect as well. And the only factor that is able to offset these price increasing trends is that these technologies became more and more nature over time. So this is the only factor that works against the price increasing factors. And one quick outlook on the popularity of PPA constructs. These are some latest, very fresh statistics about the popularity and the magnitude, how many capacities are contracted for PPA. This is not realized, it is just contracted capacities for PPA. And you can see that there are some countries where auctions actually stop. They don't really want to organize more, and PPAs are very, very popular. These are Finland, Denmark, and Spain. For Spain, as I mentioned, we don't really know their plans with auctions yet. Of course, there are some countries where both the auction volumes and the PPAs are very, very significant. These countries are France, Germany, Netherlands, Ireland, and Poland. But there are some countries, and there's some overlap between these groups, where the auctions were quite undersubscribed in the last 1 or 2 years, and the contracted PPA volumes are very high. This can mean that PPAs can be a competitor of the auctions, and maybe in these few years, the investors chose PPAs instead of auctions. This is only an assumption, but for wind energy, for Germany, Ireland, Italy, Netherlands, Poland, and Spain, it was observable. And in case of PV, Spain, Poland, Italy, and Greece are the countries where PPA can be a substitution of auctions. And just to summarize some stories, what we observed before the conclusions is that the reason why we see that some countries stop to organize further auctions is simply because some technologies became so mature that they don't want to support them anymore. For example, Denmark stopped to organize traditional technology neutral tenders, or Greece will close the auction scheme next year, or for example, Netherlands removed PV from the eligible technologies on their auction scheme. And a few countries like Lithuania and Finland, they organized previously traditional PV or onshore wind auctions, but they seem to have to terminate these versions of auctions. And we see other trends where countries keep very high announced volumes at the auctions and keep the high frequency of auctions. So it seems like the popularity of auctions is not changing. For example, France, Germany, Italy, and Poland. And there are some countries where it seems like the innovative auctions became more and more significant. For example, this version I mentioned, when renewable energy sites are paired with some kind of storage obligation. For example, in Spain, Hungary, Portugal with the floating PV and floating wind, and this PV or industrial PV for self-consumption mentioned in Luxembourg. And yeah, these were some trends I mentioned. And just to conclude quickly, what we can see based on this information I wanted to share is that auction designs in the European Union are very heterogeneous. It is good in a term that every country can design their own auction based on their specificities, but if there are big international investors, they have to put a little bit more energy into to adapting to specific rules in every country. And what is also important that we don't really see very big changes in the auction scheme, but it is important to know that these processes have a little bit slow lead time. So it is possible that some countries wanted to start some changes in their auction scheme, but this is a little bit slower processes, and we may not see these reactions yet. What is an exemption is that offshore wind auctions are a little bit different from the traditional auctions, and they seem to be very, very important, more and more important, and definitely on a developing and expanding trajectory. And the performance of auction, if we judge them based on the subscription rates and the prices, they seem to be significantly poorer, their performance, than a few years ago. But it is very important not to draw negative conclusions very quickly, because if we correct them with inflation and the picture will be a lot less negative. And it is also possible that the current negative trends we observe, they are not, they are only temporal processes, and if there will be a little bit more calm environment, everything will go back to normal, a little bit better position. And it is also possible that there are bigger and bigger pressure on the decarbonization of the EU countries, and it can happen that there is a switch of preferences from the cost-efficient way of supporting renewable energy in favor of the fast spread of capacity deployment. And it is also important that competitive auctions are very highly regulated support channels, and this can lead to that, or incentivize investors to choose other less regulated forms of support, for example, PPAs, as I mentioned. And the last and very, very important conclusion is that it's quite natural that when something is very innovative and new and needs a lot of regulation to incentivize the spread of renewables, over time, they will need less and less support. And this is just a natural thing that auctions became less and less important over time as these technologies became more and more mature. So these were my conclusions. Sorry, I was a bit longer than I wanted to. And I don't know if
Thank you very much, Betty, for the presentation. We are a little bit behind schedule, but it would be nice to have an opportunity for one or two questions from the audience. I see already one in the chat about the operation of a fixed premium scheme. I would advise the questioner to wait for the further presentations, because there will be a detailed presentation about the system in North Macedonia, which actually applies a fixed premium type of scheme. And I would like to ask from the audience whether there is a question related to Bettina's presentation. Please raise your hands, and we have time for one or two questions. Yes, Tanvir?
Thank you very much for your presentation. This is Tanvir. I am a PhD student, University of Saget, and I am doing my PhD basically on renewable energy auction modeling for the developing countries. Just one question to you, that is, you mentioned in your presentation that the streaker pre-qualification in the initial level, it is very tough for implementing the streaker pre-qualification requirement, because sometimes the interested parties are not to show their interest for participating in the auctioning format if there is too much streaker pre-qualification requirement. So can you go for the initial level lenient process or not? What is your suggestion?
Sorry, can you repeat the end of your question?
Can you go for the first time in the initial level the lenient pre-qualification requirement? Because in the initial level, in the pictures I saw, that is the acceptance of the auction is not too much in European Union. So the acceptance level is not too much high in European Union. So in the initial level, isn't wise to accept the lenient pre-qualification requirement instead of a stricter process?
Well, I think for the first round, it is better to be a little bit less strict about this, just to map a general interest of the investors and what kind of investors are present in your country. But after one or two rounds organized of auctions, you will see if it's a very big problem. You need to filter the bidders a little bit more strictly, or you can be a little bit less strict about this and let more investors to participate on the auctions. So in my opinion, but it's only my opinion, is that in the first few rounds you can be a little bit more brave in terms of this, but after then you will see if you need very strict requirements or not.
Yes, because this is my opinion. In my paper, I suggested this as well for the developing countries. But the initial level lenient process is very helpful because for encouraging the investors, for encouraging the bidders, it is quite helpful rather than the streaker process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see. Yeah, there is one question from Jose as well.
Hi there. More than a question, it was just a follow-up comment on the presentation on the reasons for the subscription. You mentioned many of them. I think another, I'm not sure it was that clear from your presentation. Another reason why there has been quite some of the subscription, I mean, obviously the bid ceilings or reservation prices have not necessarily been updated. So, and what we have seen is the LCOEs over this during the inflation that you mentioned have increased, but also what we observe is some producers or some developers actually seeing, well, you know, what's my outside option? I can get much more money in the market or through PPA. So they actually, I mean, there's some indication that some of these investors have said, okay, I'm not keen on going to the auction scheme, and now I'd rather take my chances and go to the market, and that is something. I mean, obviously we cannot prove it, but it's some of the things we've been hearing also on our side at the European Commission from you know, certain stakeholders and so on and so forth. Obviously, you know, if you don't update the reservation prices, it makes it even less interesting to participate.
Thank you. Thank you. It was an important addition.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Jose, for the comment. And you can remain with camera on as well, because the next presenter will be you in this workshop. So I would like to introduce you, Jose Arias Cabrera from DG Energy, who will speak about the electricity market design reforms and the role of auctions in the future of the European Union, how the Commission sees it, and Jose, how Jose sees it. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, Alpha, and thank you very much to all the participants. And before I forget, one other thing. So also when you presented in the previous presentation, when you presented the prices at which the auctions were awarded, one has to be also careful with the potential comparisons, because the LCOE are specific. I mean, you know, the LCOE can be specific to each country. So even at each corner of the country, so you might have a place in I'm Spanish, you might have a place in Spain where the wind blows much more often on a much regular basis. So obviously the you know, you have a better situation to exploit your wind park than you might have in a place where there's less wind. So you know, we need to be a bit careful with that. Okay, and without further ado, I jump into my presentation. Now you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So again, once again for the invitation, before I start my presentation, I will say the usual disclaimer: these are my views and not necessarily reflecting those of the European Commission. Although basically I'm going to present our proposal for the revision of the electricity market design. And you must be aware that currently this is under negotiation, and it's in with the Parliament and the Council. And you know, the idea is that the objective is that this reform should be achieved by the end of the year. But I mean, a number of articles are quite controversial, namely including those related to auctions and support schemes in the way of two-way contract for differences. So everything I'm saying, it's in the public domain. But yeah, just so you know that the negotiations are ongoing between co-legislators. So as a result of the crisis crisis resulting from the Russian invasion, there was a proposal to reform the electricity market design to mitigate the impact of high gas prices and electricity bills, to protect consumers, and to boost the renewable investments. So our proposal was adopted in mid in March of this year, and it's been very expedited. So the Parliament came out with its approved is a report in September, and the Council only in October. It's a general approach, and there's years to come with this new legislative proposal by the end of the year. So it's quite an accelerated procedure, and it's keeping us all very busy here at the institutions. So the objective pursues 4 objectives. So as I said, better protect and empower consumers. Those are all the provisions related to energy sharing, fixed price contracts, so on and so forth, which mostly relate to the directive. The directive. Then there's the enhancing of stability of predictability of the cost of energy, contributing to the competitiveness of the EU economy. This pertains to making sure that there's a strong promotion of long-term contracts, which are boosted by this reform, either through contract for differences, through PPAs, or through forwards. At the same time, with these instruments, we also put in place another support scheme which foresees the acceleration and integration of renewable with flexibility services. And finally, we have done a revision of the remit, so the better market monitoring and surveillance, and this has already been adopted. And it gives additional powers to ACER, the regulator, the energy regulator, to survey that there's not malfunctioning or misguided use of in the market. So I will concentrate my presentation on one of these long-term contracts, which we're trying to boost in the way of support schemes, but I'll also give you some snippets of other places of the electricity market regulation reform where we are making use of auctions. So in Article 2 and Article 19b of our proposal, we are introducing the mandatory use of contract for differences. And but before, a bit of background. So what we know is that to achieve our decarbonization objectives that you know very well, this 42.5 with an aspiration to reach 45% by 2030, public funding still remains necessary. So we are, and that perhaps is part of the debate later on, we want to use all the potential tools to achieve our renewable targets, namely PPAs, use market entries and the use of forwards. But what we are seeing is that the public funding will still play a role. So to us, both instruments, PPA and contract for difference or any other type of support scheme, are complements to achieve the goal. So none of them will be able to fulfill our very ambitious targets on their own. So what we have seen, and the previous presenter gave us as a snippet, we have used over time in Europe different forms of public supports. And you see on the right-hand side a graph based on the AUDES 2 data set, which shows the different evolution from the use of feed-in tariffs to feed-in premiums, two-way CFDs or one-way CFDs. We've seen that two-way CFDs are becoming more and more important over time, and this is more and more the case since in the stated guidelines, there's a push for either two-way CFDs or instruments or support schemes where there's a clawback. And a clawback means that you might still have a one-way CFD or a feed-in premium, but if there's uncertainty about the revenues that you as a developer might make, Digi Competition will impose you a clawback to ensure that you are not receiving excessive remuneration. Because as you know, stated rules have to control that if there's state aid which is granted to someone, this doesn't lead to overcompensation. So what we've seen over the crisis is that a number of developers, not all, because some of them were tied by long-term contracts, but a number of or say low marginal cost technologies received a significant amount of money because of the high electricity prices. So that's something that state aid tries to has to prevent. And that's why we include in more and more this clawback, or we make use of this two-way CFDs or other support schemes which might be impose a cap. So also the use of two-way CFDs is an interesting tool because somehow it allows you to achieve a decoupling. So de facto, you are not affecting how the market works. So the last unit brought into the market is the one setting the price. But what you're able to do is, if you have a two-way CFD with its cap, the state is able to get some money back and can redistribute it then to customers. And this is an implicit way of reducing the price for consumers. So in some way you achieve some sort of decoupling. But what's very important, and that's part of our proposal, is to have smartly designed two-way CFDs. You need to avoid things like produce and forget, meaning like you cannot be that you produce at whatever cost. So I mean, in principle, if if the market price is negative, you should not be receiving support. Actually, as a matter of fact, if the market price is below your operating cost, if you are a market operator, you would not produce. So in principle, you should not be receiving support when your production is below marginal cost. It's true that for most renewables, this marginal cost is probably close to zero. So therefore, one could arguably say, well, you should not be receiving this support when prices are negative, in particular because this creates a distortion for the market. So how does the EU framework look in terms of the two-way CFDs? How does this fit in? So I already mentioned a bit that in the stated guidelines, in the SEAC, and also in the temporary crisis and nutrition framework, there's a push towards this type of instrument. As a matter of fact, in the TCTF, in the Transitory Crisis and Temporary Framework, these are imposed. The use of two-way CFDs for the grant of operating aid for solar and wind. And there are a few exemptions, notably related to small installations, and related to renewable energy communities, which require low installations. Then in the Renewable Energy Directive, in Articles 4 and 6, we include the main design principles for the support of renewable schemes. So these design principles are that any support schemes needs to provide the incentives for the integration of electricity. It's very important that the renewable energy producers respond to market price signals. That's why the idea of smart CFDs is paramount. Then the support has to be granted through open, transparent, competitive, non-discriminatory, and cost-effective procedures. There are a few exemptions to competitive bidding, but the rule is that it should be used through competitive bidding. And the Renewable Energy Directive allows for different types of support schemes. Notably, as the previous speaker presented, you could have sliding or fixed market premiums. But this reform that we're bringing in makes it compulsory that you only use a two-way contract for differences when there's direct price support scheme and for a subset of technologies. And also, what is important to avoid, and in order to give certainty for investors, is that existing support schemes cannot be modified to the detriment of the beneficiary. So there are a number of instances where this can be modified. This in principle should be avoided, but if they are, this should not imply that the beneficiary of the support scheme is worse off. Okay, so what are we proposing? So we are providing a definition of two-way contract with difference, and that's spelled out in Article 2. And this is defined as a contract between a generator and usually a public entity, which provides both a minimum remuneration and a limit to excess remuneration. So this is a very wide concept in the sense that you could have within this type of definition of two-way contract for differences, capability-based CFD, yardstick CFD, financial CFDs, CFDs which have more than one strike price, so like those so-called corridor CFDs. Then in addition, we have as a principle in the definition that the contract is designed to preserve incentives for the generating facility to operate and participate efficiently in the electricity markets. This is very important. This is what I refer to as smart CFDs. You need to make sure that all these installations are exposed to market signals. And that's why the reference to operation and participate efficiently in the electricity markets is crucial. Then there's a reference to Articles 4.2 of the Renewable Energy Directive, where I listed already the principles that were in place, and these are should be applicable to two-way contract for differences. I can tell you already that the European Parliament and the Council have modified this definition, and this reference to the Renewable Energy Directive has been deleted by both co-legislators. The Parliament has included it in some of the design principles, while the Council takes out snippets from these principles and put them as design principles themselves. What else? So then Article 19b itself, what it says is direct price support schemes. So already you are limiting the type of support schemes you're referring to. So you could have a situation where you provide investment grant, and that's not covered by this obligation. So direct price support schemes for new investments in wind, solar, geothermal, hydro without reservoir, and nuclear shall be in the form of a two-way contract for differences. So why these technologies? These technologies, because they in principle are those which are less responsive, more mature. So we want to keep still the full exposure to this flexible flexible technologies like hydro with reservoir to be fully exposed to the market. It's true that one could also design two-way CFDs to provide this full exposure, but we have been trying to be conservative and limit the two-way contract for differences to more mature technologies which have less scope for flexibility. Then in our proposal, there was an addition to principles that the revenues which could be collected if the market price is above the strike price shall be distributed equally to all consumers, and their fund is done on a per megawatt consumption, per megawatt hour consumption, and this distribution of revenues should not remove the incentive to decrease consumption when prices are high and avoid that it undermines suppliers' competition. This means that basically whenever there's money which is gathered by the state because the electricity market price is higher than the strike price, this redistribution should not occur on for instance, on a daily basis, but rather we should get give lump sum payments on a yearly basis, so that you as a customer, you're still incentivized to reduce your consumption, to follow the market, and then there's a certain degree of uncertainty on whether you will be getting a check or not from the state. So this comes, but it's not affecting you. It should not affect or should minimize how it conditions your decisions to consume. So as I said, the legislators have proposed a number of amendments, and this is currently being discussed, and it's very controversial. I gave you already a hint of some of the things which are being discussed, but the amendments provided by the different legislators go in the line of introducing some transition period of when will this provision enter into force, also what type of installation should it apply? Is it to new investments or to new and existing investments? Sorry, new or existing facilities. So investments in new or existing facilities, or just investments in new facilities. Or also, there's a number of design criteria for the contract for differences, which have been introduced by both legislators. And also, there's also some criteria on how this revenue should be used, and both legislators have provided a subset of principles. All this is available, but since this is currently being negotiated, I wouldn't like to dive further into it. So, in addition, and before I get into this, you should know that the Commission has also, in its proposal, introduced the possibility to use a flexibility support scheme, so to allow for the integration of this additional renewable capacity that will be brought into the market. And this is a flexibility support scheme for non-fossil fuel technologies. So it will take the form of still an auction. It should be allocated through competitive bidding, and it will take the form of a capacity payment, similar to what happens in the case of capacity remuneration mechanisms. But this time around is only focused on non-fossil flexibility. And in addition, so we are proposing also a set of measures to enhance the use of power purchase agreements. And one of the provisions in Article 19A dealing with the PPAs refers to the fact that whenever there's a support scheme for renewables, this support scheme should also be allowed. So developers should also be allowed to sell part of that capacity under PPAs. Okay, and then in parallel, we are seeing that well, we have the principles in the red. The EMD modifies the type of support schemes that can be used for these given technologies to just two-way contract for differences. And at the same time, there's our proposal on the Net Zero Industry Act, and there's the famous Article 20, which deals with auction for renewables. And here, the Net Zero Industry Act, as proposed by the Commission, introduces the use of non-price criteria in these auctions. This was mentioned by the previous speaker also. I think she referred to multi-criteria auctions. And here we proposed the use of the introduction of certain criteria, namely innovation, sustainability, system integration, and resilience criteria. The resilience criteria, the idea is to promote achieving these additional objectives in addition to decreasing the amount of support needed to get the necessary capacity. And then the resilience criteria, in particular, what it does is it kind of imposes on developers a differentiation. So diversification, sorry. So you cannot simply source whenever there's a lot of concentration on the source you are supplying, you're sourcing from. So namely, this would potentially apply to PV, where a lot of the PV comes from China. So if that's the case, you might be rewarded less points, because what you want to do is try to make sure that you're as diversified as possible, so that if we have a certain scarcity of supply, that you haven't put all your eggs in the same basket. And then at the same time, you might have heard also there's the Wind Action Power Plan that was adopted recently, and as part of the Wind Action package, Wind Action Power Plan, there's a set of actions, and one of them deals with providing guidance and recommendations on auction design. And namely here, we are dealing with, so what's covered under the Wind Action Power Package Plan is we will deal with non-price criteria, either as per qualification or as award criteria. also how to best use or set penalties, also bid ceilings, so mainly notably measures that should incentivize the deployment of renewables. Also the use of negative bidding, which we have seen becoming more and more present, in particular for offshore, and yeah, and the potential use of and how to best use price indexation. And that will be all for me, and I'm happy to reply to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. As we are a little bit behind schedule, and as Jose will be part of the roundtable discussion as well, if it's okay for you, Jose, is it okay if we postpone the question part into? Okay, thank you very much. So then we can move on to the next presentation, and you can ask your questions in the dedicated section in the roundtable discussion for Jose. And now the next presenter will be András Vékony from REC, who will present an overview about the current state of renewable auction in the energy community contracting parties. So András, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I am András Vékony, and I will summarize the current status of renewable auctions in the energy community contracting parties. And as Alpha already mentioned, I will focus on in 8 countries, so I will not cover the situation in Ukraine. So my presentation will start by an overview on the electricity sector of the analyzed countries in order to show the context of the renewable auctions. Then I will move to the auctions themselves, which countries introduced them already, how they designed their auction, and what was the outcome in terms of participation, contracted volumes, and prices. And after that, I will draw some conclusion on the status of auctions in the energy community in comparison with the EU, and highlight some potential challenges also. So at first, if we look at the electricity mix of the 8 countries, we see that it is quite different from the European Union's electricity mix because of a high share of coal. Not natural gas has a limited role. There is no nuclear energy in these 8 countries. But we see that the total renewable share, it is pretty much the same. It is around 40%, so it's quite high, we could say, but the vast majority comes from hydro. And while in the European Union, it is more common to rely on wind, solar PV, or bioenergy. If you look at the country level, there we see much high diversity among countries, especially in relation to share of coal and hydro, but it is general that wind, PV, and bioenergy has a limited role in these countries, maybe except Montenegro, where the wind has already a share of or close to 10%. And we have to highlight that these technologies are basically the ones that are usually promoted through auctions. Going to deeper and show some trends on this, you see on the graph on the left side, the renewable share of the electricity generation without hydro. So it is not the total renewable share. And you see that in average is only about 3.7%. Montenegro having the highest share thanks to its large wind capacities installed since 2017. And in general, it can be said that the development of these technologies started around 2018-19. It started with the wind capacities first and continued with solar development in the last 2 or 3 years. And what I like to highlight here, the capacities you see on the right hand are almost entirely pre-auction capacities. So as auctions were organized just in the last couple of years, and very, very few awarded projects have been commissioned until 2022. Turning on the auctions, out of these 8 countries, 4 have already completed auctions. North Macedonia was the first in 2019. And organized 3 auction runs altogether, all of them focused on solar PV. Albania followed him in 2020, and it was the first country in the region that launched a wind auction, while Serbia and Georgia joined them in this year, organizing PV and wind auctions, but Georgia also organized hydro and other renewable auctions. So in some, 4 countries completed 8 auction rounds so far, but in some cases they had different auctions for different technologies within one round. So in total, we can say that 12 auctions were completed. In this overview, we consider the support scheme as an auction only if a price-based selection mechanism applied. So we did not consider alternative formats. However, I like to show the status also in countries where there are no auctions yet, or more precisely in Kosovo, there is already an auction ongoing, 100 megawatt PV. The deadlines for submission of the bids is in January next year, and there is also a plan to make a wind auction next year. In Bosnia and Moldova, the regulation is ready. In Bosnia, there's no information on the call when it will be published. However, in Moldova, there is a communication that the next year there will be a PV wind and also a biogas and biomass auction organized, while in Montenegro, the regulation is not implemented yet, but the intention to introduce auctions is declared last year. Going deeper into the designs of the 12 completed and the 1 ongoing auctions, we can see that all the 13 auctions are capacity-based and technology-specific. So in contrast with the European Union, where, as Bettina presented, the picture is more diverse. Here, in these terms, they are much more similar. Most auctions focused on solar PV, but in auction capacities, it is more balanced as the wind auctions, especially the Serbian one, are larger. Most of the auctions are multi-item auctions, which means that the participants bring their own project with different sizes and locations, and more participants are selected for the support. This is how auctions are organized generally in the European Union. But there are also examples here for site-specific single-item auctions, where basically the auctioneer designs the project on specific territory, and this is generally state-owned, and one contractor is selected in the auction. And there is also an example for hybrid solution in this term in North Macedonia, where more projects were selected to a specific state-owned territory, so it is also possible. Regarding pre-qualification criteria, the general framework is similar to the European Union, so there are material or financial pre-qualifications. In terms of bid bonds, the levels are very similar to the European levels, but in other terms, especially regarding the technical expertise and financial capability of the bidders, we saw that these requirements are a little bit more strict than compared to what we see in the European Union. Here are some examples for that little bit more demanding requirements, for example, on bid security in Kosovo, on balance sheet and income criteria in Macedonia, years of experience with a specific technology in Albania, or to submit a plan about the infrastructure development around the power plant. These are not very common in the European Union, according to our experiences. Continuing with the winner selection procedure, all auctions are price-only auctions, and regarding the procedure, static procedures are common both in the European Union and in the energy community. One main type of procedures are the one-round procedures, where the participants submit their pre-qualification documents and financial bid together. The auction will assess first, of course, the pre-qualification, and only the bids of the qualified participants will be opened. Another solution is the two-round procedure, where after the pre-qualification round, only the qualified participants will submit bids. In the second one, it has the disadvantage that the bidders may know that only a limited number of investors will participate in the price competition, and this may lead to higher financial offers. Finally, in some cases, it also can, there are examples for this in the European Union and in the energy community countries, that an electronic reverse auction is held, where the prices automatically decreases and the participants has to decide at what price level they quit without knowing the decision of the other participants. Regarding the remuneration scheme, we can see that the contract for difference is the most common also in the European Union, but also here in the energy community countries. And there are some hybrid systems instead of classic feed-in tariffs. For example, Albania, there are two very interesting solutions, because 50 to 70% of the capacity is supported with a feed-in tariff system, and the other part of the electricity sold has to be sold in a market for a market price. While in Kosovo, the scheme starts as a classic feed-in tariff scheme, but it will be converted to contract for differences later once a liquid power exchange will be available. On ceiling price, the common practice is to define it in the call, what maximum financial bid can be submitted, but there are alternative solutions. For example, in case of electronic auctions, especially if there are two rounds, and there is in the first round there are also financial offers, then basically the second round starts from the result of the first round, and there is an absolutely unique solution for that introduced in Georgia, which is called median tariff principle, where the median of all bids is the maximum price. Turning to the outcomes of auctions, we can conclude that the auctions were successful in terms of participation and contracted capacities as well. Only two under-subscribed auctions can be named: the Georgian other renewable auction, but other renewable is also not very successful in Europe, so maybe it's not very surprising. And the solar PV auction in Serbia was undersubscribed, and there is one questionable auction in North Macedonia, where the contracted volumes are lower than the auctioned, but the information are not the publicly available information does not allow us to decide whether it was undersubscribed or not. And I'd like to highlight the case of wind auction in Albania, because here all the qualified bids was accepted. So based on this, we could conclude that there was no competition. But this is due to the decision of the auctioneer that accepted all the bids below the ceiling price and contract much more capacities than it was auctioned. So this strategy can be good for increasing the renewable capacities, if this is the primary goal, and not the efficiency of the support scheme. But we have to know that this is on the expense of higher prices, and maybe not only at the auction at hand, but also in the future, as project owners learn from this, that all the bids below the ceiling price which will be accepted, it discouraged them maybe from submitting competitive prices in the future, and the whole auction can result in similar to an administrative support scheme where the price is predefined and every project is supported, which in general is not the goal of auctions, but can be acceptable if really the maximizing the renewable capacities is the primary goal. Regarding the contracted capacities, we can conclude that there are two other auctions besides the Albanian, the two Georgian, where the contracted capacities were higher than the auctioned. Exactly, the auction capacities were contracted in 5 cases, and somewhat lower capacities were contracted in 2 cases. However, this difference can be due to the rules on handling the marginal bid, whether is it possible to contract more than auction, or there's a strict limit that can lead to somewhat lower contracted, or in some cases there is a possibility for partial support, where only a part of the marginal bid is awarded, like in Serbia. In this way, the contracted capacities can be the same as auctioned. But in total, in energy community level, the contracted capacities were higher than planned, so we can say that the auctions were successful in this term as well. And if we see the average strike prices, we also see that most of the auctions went well. For PV, it is a little bit hard to compare the results because of the different remuneration schemes. The Georgian price is pretty much in line with the European Union's prices. The Serbian price seems to be a little bit high, but this one, the one auction that was undersubscribed, so maybe the absence of competition led to high price. And what we can also see here, the Albanian price is pretty low, but here again it was a hybrid system where this is the fit, basically what you see, 25 and 30 euro per megawatt hour. This is supplemented with market revenues. So in average, the average of the two should cover the costs of the investment. Regarding the wind, we have fewer data points, but they are more comparable to each other because overall are contract for difference schemes, and these prices are closer to each other and also fits into the wide price range of European prices. So as a conclusion, I first draw the learning curve of a renewable support scheme and place the energy community auctions in this picture. Most of the countries start supporting renewable production in an administrative feed-in tariff scheme where there is no competition, price is predefined, and there is a priority dispatch, and start to organize auctions as a next stage where efficiency of the support scheme becomes more important. But within auctions, there is also the development and learning curve. For example, one dimension is whether the countries organize single item or multi-item auctions, and the latter is more advanced. Other dimension could be whether the auctions are technology specific or it is allowed for different technologies to compete each other. Another dimension is the remuneration scheme. Older schemes consist of feed-in tariffs. Later or now it is more common and recommended or even prescribed by the regulation to include feed-in premiums, either fixed premiums or sliding premiums. Regarding the technologies, they focus on PV and offshore wind at the beginning. Later, if there is possibility, the country has the sea coast, then offshore wind auctions are also there. And as we learned from Bettina's presentation, there are even more newer technologies like floating PV, offshore agri-PV, or renewable plus storage auctions. And finally, I would like to highlight here is the procedure that in the most common in the beginning, that having to run a financial and material pre-qualification, and after that a price competition. And it is not very common even in the EU, but in some cases there are new aspects, environmental criteria, either in the form of pre-qualification or in the form of a multi-criteria assessment, where a project with better environmental quality can be awarded, even if the price is a little bit higher, maybe. And on this picture, yeah, I'm sorry, as Bettina also presented, in many countries, corporate renewable PP are starting to take over the role of the auctions. So auctions are a stage in the renewable support scheme, but it's not sure that they're the last stage. And if you want to place the energy community auctions in this picture, we can conclude that, of course, they are rather like the first auctions are generally organized, especially because they are technology specific, focuses on PV and wind, and consists of pre-qualification and price competition rounds. But they can be considered more advanced in terms of remuneration schemes, as fixed premiums and CFDs are quite common, and feed-in tariffs basically appears only provisional or in hybrid systems. And as a final slide, as the second part of conclusion, I like to identify some challenges and potential solutions on them. However, defining more detail, the recommendations will be the topic of the third workshop that will be organized in February, March. So this is really just very brief recommendations here. One challenge could be the absence of liquid exchange markets, because for more advanced remuneration scheme, reference market price is needed. But many countries do not have such power exchange. Here, an alternative can be to use power exchanges of neighboring countries. For example, Kosovo plans to do something like this with the Alpex, which is the Albanian stock exchange. It is also a possibility for other countries, because there are so many quite liquid power exchanges around these countries, so they can choose. And the other topic is more complex. What I want to mention is the risk aversion and risk mitigation of auctioneers regarding participation, price, and realization. Maybe that is why they hold simple auctions, including single item auctions in some cases, and also for defining quite strong pre-qualification criteria, targeting mainly on large investors, because they are only who are capable of meeting such criteria, which can be good for higher realization rates, but it is clear that it can lead to lower effective competition and higher prices, even maybe to lower contracted volumes. And it is also the case if there is a two-round procedure where only the pre-qualified participants submit financial bids. And what we also seen in some cases that there is a strong control on the process. So in multiple intervention points from the auctioneer, and some committee decides on the pre-qualification criteria. Here, our recommendation would be to sooner or later to move to more market-based solutions. Multi-item auctions allow competition between different technologies and introduce feed-in premiums. Ensure transparency in selection process. So instead of using committees, define simple rules, and where the assessment of fulfillment of the pre-qualification criteria are very, very easy and simple, and cannot be question about that. Every decision has to be communicated very clearly, and focusing more on high participation And multi-technology auction also supporting this. Transparency is also attracting for the potential investors, and the lower pre-qualifications, of course, especially to include small local actors besides to the large international companies, which can lead to lower prices and higher volumes. Thank you. That was my presentation, and I'm ready for questions. You are muted, Alpha.
Sorry. So again, thank you, András, very much for the presentation. As we won't be part of the roundtable discussion, I allow for 2 questions from the audience. If you have questions, please raise hands. I don't see anyone at this point. Okay, then I think we should move on to the last presentation of today's workshop. I would like to present you Dr. Alexander Dedinek, who is a researcher at the Macedonian Academy of Science and Arts and participated in the implementation of several auctions, and he will share a detailed experience about the North Macedonian auction rounds and how the system operates there. So thank you very much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, but not in present. Yeah, now it's good. Yes.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to be part of this today discussion workshop, however we call this. But this is very important because it's coming in one specific time when the price on the market are going down again, compared to the prices that were in 2022. Yeah, today I'm going to present let's say the story of the premiums, introduction of the premiums in North Macedonia, from starting from the beginning and to the realization. I will go back a little bit in the time in order to explain you how we decided to introduce the premiums in North Macedonia and what is the situation now. And in the previous presentation already was said about the some things, some results were presented, but also I'm going to go in a little bit more details. So my presentation is divided in three parts: how we started, the analysis that were done, and benefits from the introduction of the premiums in North Macedonia. But before to start, I would like to go with one remark, let's say, from Thomas Edison, who said that I will put the money on the solar energy, and I hope that we are not going to wait to use the whole oil and coal, and after that to put more attention of the solar. So I think that's the reason why I said at the beginning that this is a real time for this discussion, because the solar and the wind energy is coming. It's becoming more and more important in the energy sector. The situation in the energy community was presented, but I would like to put more attention on something else. I would like to present you the situation, what happened in the period in the last 10 years from 2011 to 2020. As you can see, if you compare the situation, what happened in the EU 27 countries and with wind and solar. So the EU increase the share of the wind is doubled in this 10 years period. The share of solar is triple, while the situation in the countries in the region, in the Western Balkan 6 countries, was almost zero. So there was no investment in renewable, especially in solar and wind. We almost all the countries in the region, we saw that there was some feed-in tariffs, but the application of these feed-in tariffs was low because of the impact of the prices. We have to have in mind that the prices in the region are lower. Electricity prices in the region are lower compared to the prices at the EU level. So that was one of the reasons why the investment in this region are not realized. One of the idea how to increase the investment was with the introduction of the premiums. So we started our story in 2017, and I'm calling this pink story because this was a successful story. We started with the new energy law in 2017. With this energy law, we transposed the third energy package. There was a big discussion about the support schemes that we wanted to have in this law. So we created two support schemes, mainly two support schemes in the energy law. The first one is the well-known feed-in tariffs, and the second one were the premiums. There was some bylaws, analysis, debate, comments, and other things. And in 2019, the bylaws were adopted, the tender was published, and auctions were organized. In 2020, the construction of some of the PV power plants at that time started. So what was the situation with the support, with the subsidies in the country? I have this period from 2010 to 2018 in order to make a comparison before the introduction of the premiums mechanism in North Macedonia. So the subsidies were around 20 million of euros at the yearly level. If you compare, the rest are the prices that are coming from the market. With these prices, with these subsidies, the price of the electricity was increased for around, depending from year to year, from 2.5 up to 4 euros per megawatt hour. And on the right side here, you can see the prices, actually the feed-in tariffs for different technologies, average prices for different technologies in 2018. So what was the idea? To create the new support schemes, but without impact on the consumer price, because the feed-in tariffs has some impact on the consumer price. The idea was to create some new support schemes that there will, without impact on the consumer price, that will be transparent and non-discriminatory according to the directives and other things, to be market-based, and to be attractive for the big and at the same time for the small investors, and to make this investment on the private and on the state land. So in order to realize this idea, as I said, the energy law was adopted, the premiums were introduced, the money for paying the premiums are coming from the state budget, and the auctions are also part from the energy law in order to have a premiums. Rule book of renewable also was developed with the prosumers, analysis, detailed analysis for the introduction of the premiums and type of the premiums, and the technology was developed. Decree for the introduction of the measure for the support schemes, and at the end, we introduce at the country level also buyer on the last resort. That means that if there is some producers of electricity with premiums that don't want to participate at the market, he can sell his electricity at the buyer of last resort. We also organize a tender for this buyer of last resort. I'm not going to explain. You know these three different types of the premiums. We analyze all the different types of the premiums at that time. We create a detailed model that was based on the real data. So the real data for the production of electricity is coming from the hydro, solar, wind, biogas. And also we make analysis on the market at that time, on the HUPEX market. And we found at that time that if the average price on the market is, for example, in 2017, the average price was 50 euros per megawatt hour, the PV, because they are producing during the peak, the production price is 56 euros per megawatt hour. But now we can see that because of the a lot of investment in PV, the price on the peak is decreased, or it's pretty much at the same level as base price. Also, a lot of detailed data, detailed research was done for the creation of the economic model. For example, cost of equity in the region, in the EU countries, cost of the debt, cost of the technologies, working hours, inflation rate, and other things, and so on and so on. We use this economic model for the development of the premiums. As I said, we tested the three different types of the premiums: variable premium, fixed premium, and cap and floor premium. We found that the variable premium should be around, at that time, around 83 euros per megawatt hour, fixed premium to be around 33 euros per megawatt hour, and cap and floor to be between 75 and 95 euros per megawatt hour. We tested the model for the whole period from 2011 to 2017, the market price, and we found what will happen if the same market price are implemented in the period that is following. So if the same market price is implemented in this period, the average subsidies, if we implemented variable premium, should be around 10 million of euros in all three. So we made the model in all three models to have the same subsidies that should come from the budget. We developed three different scenarios: pessimistic, realistic, and optimistic. In all three different scenarios, different investment cost was used. And also something that was very important is that, as I said, the money should come from the budget. So we have to find the most predictable model, the most predictable allocation of the money from the budget. And we found that fixed premium is the most appropriate mechanism if you want to allocate the money from the budget. All other things were a little bit complicated and need more administration compared to the fixed premium. So there was pros and cons for the three options, and we found, as I said, that the fixed premium is the most appropriate for the implementation, and that the price of the fixed premium should start at 15 euros per megawatt hour. But why I call this story pink story? We organized, as it was mentioned in the previous presentation, three different tenders, one on the state land and two on the private land. 35 megawatts on the state land, that was the first auction, and the second auction was for the 27 megawatt on private land. But the first on the state land, there was two different type of organization of the auction. The first land, that was for around 25 megawatts, was split in 10 slots. The biggest was 10 megawatt, 5 megawatt, 2 by 2 megawatts, and 6 by 1 megawatt. And the second, because of the terrain, was 10 megawatt, the whole land. The private land was also divided in different slots. What happened? So for the auctions on the state land, there was a lot of interest, and the investors decrease the initial premium that was, as I said, 15 euros per megawatt hour. They decrease to 0.01 euro per megawatt hour. And what happened after that? After that, the positive auction was organized. So that means that the investors should pay some money to the budget if they want to construct a solar PV on that location. So for the 10 megawatt location, around 1 million euros were paid from the investors to construct a PV on that land. This was very interesting because at that time, when this auction was organized, the price on the market were very low. Also, for the 5 megawatts, 2 by 2 megawatts, for all this, there was a positive auctions. So at the end of the day, instead of allocation of money from the budget, the government received 2.7 million euros in the budget from the investors, because, as I said, because the positive auction was organized. There was a huge interest for the construction of PV. With this money that were collected from the investors, 15 euros of state land can be covered, and 5 years from the PV on the private land also can be covered. I'm talking about the premiums. And what was the initial actually calculation? The initial calculation show us that at that time, for production of 377 gigawatt hours, we are spending around 20 million euros, which are paid by the consumers. For the construction of 200 megawatts of PV that should produce around 300 gigawatt hours, the initial calculation were to allocated from the budget 4.5 million euros. But at the end of the day, we saw that instead of allocation of money from the budget, the government, actually the Ministry of Economy, collect 2.7 million euros, and at the same time, those investors that want premiums, which the numbers was very low. The price of the premium was very low, between 0.01 and 3.5, something like that, euros per megawatt hour. The second tender was organized in 2022, and on this tender, around actually 80 megawatts were allocated for the construction of the feed-in premiums. But what happened, we had 3 times more interested investors, interested investors, and the auctions was very well organized also, and the price of the premiums was around, the average was around 3 euros per megawatt hour, which decreased from 15 euros to 3 euros per megawatt hour. And at the end, I would like just to conclude that if we compare the period from 2011 to 2020, and from 2020 up to now, we can see that as a result of the auctions, but also as a result of the economic crisis, we have now for example, around 500 megawatt of solar already constructed in Macedonia. These are data for by September 2023. So by December we have even more. But if we compare with the goal in the strategy, we can see that the goal for the strategy for 2040, in 2023 we achieved 30%, more than 30% of the goal that was planned in the strategy for the period up to 2040. So thank you for your attention. Any questions are welcome.
Thank you very much, Alexander. I also suggest, as you will be part of the roundtable discussion, that the questions to be directed to you in the discussion, if it's okay for you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We are approximately 15 minutes delay with the schedule. So I think it would be okay for you. I hope it would be okay for you if we will finish the event approximately around noon. And I would like to now give the floor to László Szabó, who is the director of REC, and he would introduce the roundtable discussion, the participants, and the topics to be discussed.
Thank you very much, Alpha. Thank you very much for the whole insight. Thank you very much for the presenters as well for giving these very good presentation, nice summaries. And we have a 45 minutes roundtable discussion now, and the participants are those who see on the screen. So we have the presenters here, but we have a new guest as well. So let me welcome Naida Tasso as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Naida is a renewable energy expert from the Energy Community Secretariat. And thank you very much really to join this workshop, because I think the Energy Community Secretariat is one of the institutes probably helping the most now the contracting parties to have their auctions in the good directions. And our plan was actually at the beginning to give the floor to everyone, just to maybe you can give a reflections on the presentation, on the conclusions. If you have any thought which you want to share beforehand we start the direct questions, I think it would be nice. And because Naida, you were not presenting, I think what I will do is that I will give the floor first to you. If you have any remark to the presentation or any conclusions which you want to already draw out from this, then please go ahead, just very briefly, maybe in 4 or 5 minutes, if you can do that. Please.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, László, and good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for the invitation to join this workshop, which actually proven to be very interesting. And I love your idea to reflect on presentations, because that made at least me, and I'm sure other panelists as well, focus on presentation and listen well, which we often try to do. But when the presentations are online, sometimes there are other things happening in the office as well. So all presentations were very interesting. Maybe what I would like to highlight, and the points I believe are very important in general, but also in contracting parties of the energy community, is first of all the pre-qualification criteria, which have been mentioned by all the presenters. Importance of designing the proper criteria to make sure that we have serious projects which are going to be implemented after the auction in one hand. On the other hand, what we maybe see also happening a bit in our contracting parties is that this criteria might restrict competition and lead maybe to the higher price. So this, I believe, is a long-lasting story how to perfectly design this criteria. What have not been mentioned, and what I believe is also important, especially for our contracting parties, is how to also adjust this criteria to enable participation of citizens. I know there are some EU member states which organize separate auctions for energy communities, renewable energy communities. In some cases, it's proven to be a good example. In some cases, it's more complex. So this is something which I believe we need also to pay closer attention in our contracting parties to somehow enable participation of energy communities on the equal grounds with the big players when it comes to auctions. Of course, very interesting presentation from Jose and what's happening in the European Commission. Obviously, in energy community, we are closely following the developments in the European Union because this is something which will later come as part of the energy community acquis. So the market design is definitely very interesting for us. I would fully agree that the way to go is contract for difference, which is applicable in our contracting parties, but as mentioned also by Andreas, we have a challenge in energy community because we don't have a markets actually in place. We don't have day-ahead and intraday markets in most of our contracting parties. Power exchange are being now established, especially in the Western Balkans. But for example, in Georgia, which held auctions, there is no day-ahead and intraday market, so it's very difficult to define the price. Maybe in the next round, I will talk a bit more about the conversion event and the solution we came up in energy community, which was briefly mentioned by Andreas, but I would like to provide more details on that. But I would like also to underline what Jose mentioned about the possibility to award the part of the capacity with the PPA, so to have part of the capacity, part of the auction as contracts for difference, but also to allow the second part of the capacity to be awarded with the PPA, which was the case in Albania, for example, in auctions held in Albania. And maybe last for this round, just a small also notification what we see was happening, and that was mentioned also at the presentations in our contracting parties. That the framework, the legal and regulatory framework was not always in place when the first auctions were launched. So this is something which does not give stability and the predictability for investors and also future investments. There are no long-term schedules in place. Our contracting parties have adopted 2030 targets last year at the Ministerial Council, and at the moment they are drafting national energy and climate plans. We received several plans and the Secretariat is at the moment revising them. But what I believe is very important for investors to have a proper long-term plan and the predictability for auction. I think that would be it from my side for the first round. Thank you very much for the floor, and I'm looking forward to continue discussion further.
Thank you very much, Naida. I think these were very, very important point. And maybe just to give a similar opportunity to Alpha or Jose Alias, if you have any very prompt reaction to the other presentations, because you might have these before going to the first question. I don't know, Alpha, do you want to start with?
Yeah, I can start. I just want to have two quick reflections, one to the presentation. So in the first presentation, as I saw, and Jose also highlighted in his comment to that in the question sections, I think one of the most important thing to discuss or the thing to think about as a policymaker is the relation between the support given by this governmental-based auction system and their relation to the market. So I see it as a very huge challenge in the future of the auctions, and past experience with the latest auction years also show that there is a great changes can be present regarding this question. As in the European Union, we saw that when the prices were high, producers tend to turn away more from the auctions and turn towards market-based solutions. And now, when the prices are going back to the original level, I think it's quite a question whether the oversubscription rate of governmental auctions will become higher again, or how it will affect the PPA contracted volumes and things like that. And I think it will be also an issue in the energy community contracting parties, because despite the fact that the auction system were introduced at a later stage than in the European Union member states, but I think the same issue will be present, that if the regulatory environment is right, then the producers have the option either to go for lesser revenue in a governmental scheme or higher revenue in a market-based solution. So their relation, I think, would be a very important one. And another reflection is to Naida's comment about citizens' participation. And I think it is a twofold question. So as you rightly said, that there are schemes in Europe which provide preferable treatment for energy communities. I mean, so community energy projects. But I think it's equally important to incorporate the system, not just these community energy projects, but those local companies which are probably not as capital intensive as large international investors, and probably would like to create smaller projects with lesser capacities, but still in a market oriented way. And I think for that, there are also many solutions in the European Union. There are many countries which apply size differentiation within their auction schemes. And of course, in the smaller category size, prices are always higher, so it hurts cost efficiency. However, I think it's a really successful measure in many terms to allow participation of smaller actors, even community energy projects. Yeah.
Thank you, Alpha. Maybe, Jose, if you have any reflections now to the previous thoughts?
Yeah, just perhaps very quickly to add, I mean, as well, auctions as such are a great tool to achieve the deployment at the lowest possible support, and actually you guys have done work in that respect. You have a published report that you have done for us, and where you actually show that the auction is probably the most efficient way. Competitive auctions are probably the most efficient way to get renewables at the cheapest possible cost. At the same time, you can also incorporate other objectives, such as, for instance, protection of the environment or system integration, and we are seeing that more and more, notably in the Dutch auctions that were mentioned at the beginning, and actually that is actually allowed also within by the state aid legislation and promoted by the NC and so on and so forth. Also, something very important with Naida said is, I mean, investors need to have clarity of what's coming. The pipeline of planned auctions, that's very important, and that's actually a problem we are facing ourselves also, because it's okay now the ENC countries, so the North Sea North Sea something, so it's the North Sea countries, sorry, they have now provided some idea of what the planned capacity will be auctioned in the next years, but it's very important that this is made clear, so there's a firm commitment, because what we are observing, and this links to part of my work, is that at the end of the day, you also need to give this certainty not only for developers but also for suppliers. If you want to install the capacity, someone needs to build it. And at some point we are observing, and that's thinking that's published in the International Energy Agency, there's going to be, I mean, we're going to face potential scarcity 27 to 2030. So, if you want investors to put in the money to have the available capacity there, which is actually something we're pushing, people need to know what's coming. If you come up and react on a yearly basis, that's a complex thing. And also, I want to follow up on something that Naida mentioned on the RECs, on the renewable energy communities. We have a number of examples in some countries, and also the state aid guidelines and the Renewable Energy Directive provide exemptions for the use of competitive bidding for these kind of small installations. Some of them also some countries have specific schemes just directed to REC. To renewable energy communities, sometimes they also exempted from competitive bidding, but not always. So you can also use and have smaller auctions, and also Yeah, another tool we are developing quite a lot now in the electricity market design is the use of energy sharing, and that actually is something which I personally believe it will be very important for consumers to empower them and to be able to. What we are seeing is a lot of the PV which is coming to market is a lot of is self consumption. And you can also use all the buildings from schools, government businesses, and whatever to provide that electricity to perhaps people which are more in need, or even to sell it. But this is an additional tool which is brought very forcefully forward in the electricity market design revision, which I hope it's going to yield give very good results to make the business case for renewables even stronger, so that everyone can actually use it. And that's my quick reactions.
Thank you very much, Jose. And then maybe I give the floor to Alexander as well. But let's start with the question. So Alexander, you will do two things, that reflections, and then maybe you can start to answer the first question, because I know that you have to leave as well in some 12 minutes because you have another occasion to participate. So this is the place for reactions from your side, but let's start with the first question. And the first question for the whole panel, later on the other can join, that what are the specialties of the energy community contracting parties? Who do you see this region? Do you see any significant difference in economic terms or in the energy system which would make the design or the requirements for an efficient renewable option different than what we have seen or what we see in the European Union member state countries? So with this, I give you the floor, Alexander. Please. We don't hear you, please, the microphone.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, each country has some specifics. So I have worked in Macedonia, participated in the development of the support schemes in Macedonia, some part in Serbia, and also in Kosovo. And all the countries has some specifics related with the market. For example, the market in Serbia is the most developed one. The market is Kosovo is not developed yet. It's not open market, so you have to find a way how to deal with all these things, and we cannot implement all the things that are happening at the EU level with the country in the region. The other things is that the region is not coupled yet, so also this makes some difficulty, and we are close market. So when the market will be coupled with the rest of the EU, in that case we can talk about the support scheme on the same level. But something that I would like to mention also here, now we from let's say from the feeding tariffs we jump to feeding premiums, different type of feeding premiums as we saw from the presentations. But now we want to somehow to go back with the contract of difference, because I think that the contract of difference is not support scheme for the investor, that a support scheme for the state, for the consumers. So in the past, the idea was to find a way how to support the investors. Now, with the contract of difference, we are trying to find a way how to have some stable prices at the country level, and not to have a huge impact on the consumers and collect some money for the future investment. So we have to be very careful with this contract of difference, because on the long run, I think that we will have another things that we have to deal with that also can have a huge impact on the market in the future. And maybe we can make some combination, some hybrid models between, I don't know, contract of difference, but with some cap on the price, with some fixed premium. So all these three mechanisms together in order to have in order to have a market at the same time, and to support the investors and to support the consumers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alexander. And then let's turn to Naida, because I think you have the most experience within the region. So when we ask these questions, that what are the specialties of the energy community member states when we consider the auction design, what are these factors you would consider the most important ones?
Thank you, Laszlo. Just before I start, I see that Ivan Jerinic asked a question about the law, and he raised the hand, and it might be the question for Alexander. So if Alexander is leaving, maybe he can just briefly reflect on.
Thank you very much, Naida. I haven't seen it. So Ivan, please go ahead.
My name is Ivan Jerinic. I come from Regulatory Commission in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I just wanted to ask a question to the colleague from Macedonia, Alexander, and it is related to the method of calculating the fixed premiums. So from the presentation, I didn't get this premium of 15 euros you mentioned. Is it calculated the same for all technologies, or it is for a special technology? So do you have a special technology auctions, or it is practically the same fixed premium for everyone? And please, if you can explain me, how did you arrive to this value of 15 euros? So is there a formula? For example, I did some research and I found that fixed premiums are calculated practically as a production costs minus some reference market price. And I wonder what happens in case that the production costs are lower than the reference market price practically in that time when we are calculating this fixed premium. So basically we get a negative premium. What happens in that case? If you can share maybe your experience, if you have any.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. As I said, a very detailed study was done. I presented just the situation, just the results that are coming from a PV side, but also the analysis for the wind and hydro and biogas were done. And for different technologies, different premiums was proposed. But at that time, we decided to go to organize auctions just for the PV. The price for the wind, for example, I think was around 30 euros per megawatt hour or 35 euros per megawatt hour. I cannot remember well, but something around these figures. How this was calculated, as I said, detailed economic model was developed together with the real data, and something similar to what was said. You're calculating the levelized cost of investment, and you're comparing levelized cost of investment, the price that is the cost actually that is needed to return your investment, with the price on the market. And if you found that some additional money are needed, that difference is actually the premium that is needed. And let's say this is the shortest explanation of the situation, but yeah, that was the case. And sorry, that the last thing that you mentioned, I didn't catch. What is happening if?
Yeah, for example, now the prices on the market, let's say, are 100 euros, for example, and we calculated for wind power plants, for example, that the production costs are somewhere around 50 euros per megawatt hour. And what is the fixed premium in this case? Practically, if you take the market price and production cost, you get a negative fixed premium. It is minus 50 euros per megawatt hour. What do we do in this case?
Yeah, look, that's the case in the contract of difference or other mechanisms. There was a huge discussion in the team, let's say, that developed this analysis, and with the other relevant stakeholders, the ministry. Actually, one of the idea was to implement it cap on the fixed premium. So as you said, if the price is going up some, I don't know, 100, 150 euros, there is no premium at that point. But when we developed the analysis, the price on the market was too low. That was the first thing. And the second thing was that, as I said, the administration in that case, it's huge. So the ministry, they don't have a lot of, at that time, they don't have a lot of capacity to manage all these things. So you have to plan the budget for the next year. You have to take a look on the market, what will happen if there is no money allocated in the budget for the premiums because of, I don't know, the price on the market is too low, or vice versa. If the price on the market is too high, then you have also to make allocation of the money from the premiums for some other purposes. So that was the reason why we decided to go with this fixed premium, as I said. But now we are in the process of developing another study, and we will see what type of support schemes will be recommended.
Thank you very much. Clarify this.
Can I have a quick addition to this?
I wanted to say that Alpha raised hand, so I give the floor to Alpha. I might have one more comment as well, and I will ask Tanvir if he has comment to this or to other. So Alpha, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a very quick comment to this fixed premium. So based on European experience, I think one really disadvantage of this scheme, when then what you mentioned, when the price is extremely high and negative fixed premium would be required, it's actually very difficult to differentiate between projects. So in many instances in Europe occurred that a lot of companies entered into the fixed premium auctions with 0 bids, and it was like very difficult to decide between them to which one would be the winner of the auction. And also in some instances it occurred that the market conditions were more favorable, that fixed premium auctions tend to be empty auctions earlier than CFD auctions, because in the case of CFD, even if the market price is very high, you can you can adjust the strike price level more fluently. And one possible solution is to allow for negative bids. So like these negative bid auctions, which are more common in the offshore wind auction tenders in Europe, but there are one country, for example, Portugal, which applies this negative bid type of auction, or applied for solar PV as well. So in this case, it's a little bit unusual setup that the participants are paying to the system in order to make their projects. But of course, another disadvantage of this negative bid, that if there is a possibility to make the project on the market without paying this negative bid, which is necessarily not the case in offshore wind, but mainly the case in solar PV, because there is much easier to make a PPA there, then there is not really incentive to go for a negative bid auctions there. And this problem is not that much present for a CFD, I think. So in this regard, in this comparison, CFD is a more advantageous scheme. Of course, CFD has other disadvantages, probably we will talk about a little bit as well.
Yeah, Alexander, do you have to leave soon?
You will never know what is the most appropriate scheme for the implementation. If you implement fixed premium, for example, somebody will say, look, there is a lot of disadvantages in this. If you implement sliding premium, also there is a lot of disadvantages. So at that time, we thought that the fixed premium is fully market-based premium. So the pressure is on the investor in this with the fixed premium. Also something that is very important and that I mentioned several times in the presentation, that was the reason why I call this pink story, that we don't have nobody from the investor that participated in the auction. Nobody received this 15 euros per megawatt hour. The highest was, I think, around 13 euros, but the average is around 3 euros per megawatt, 3 to 5 euros per megawatt hour as a fixed premium. the biggest, let's say, why a lot of investors decided to go and to participate on the tender was that there is a buyer in last resort. So even with the 0.01, they have a contract of 15 years, which is very, very important for the banks. That's the reason why the people decided to go on fixed premium, even, as I said, without money. A lot, we had a lot of bids with 0.01 euros per megawatt hour, but they have some stability in order to take a loan. Because if you are a new company, you don't have a money. If you go into the bank, the bank will say, look, if you want to build, you have to have at least 5 years contract with some supplier to buy electricity in order to back your loan. Otherwise, nobody will support you. Even if you put your, I don't know, house or whatever you want, nobody will support you. That was one of the reasons why the people decided, investors decided to go with this scheme.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Just one remark from my side. Just read what Anatolis Vasily was writing in the chat, that this means that you don't need the support, but you still can decide whether you need to go for an auction for connection rights. And then just to even that the formula is not that simple, because the LCOE actually you are not comparing to the present market price. But actually what you have to have is that you have to have a vision or a modeling that how this market price will look over the next 15 years, because that's where you make the comparison, your LCOE and the long-term market price. And then it can be that no, the prices are high, but later on they can go down below to your LCOE. And an extra thing which is quite different in the amongst the technologies as well, that you might not even compare it to the market price, but what you have to compare to the market value of your production, which might mean at the same time that, for example, for PV production, your earnings will be much smaller than the market price, which you see on the market. So that's where your reference price has to be compared. So it's a very difficult task for the bidder actually to base a bid which is really reliable, and at the end they will see it as a good bid in that sense. So that's why it's quite a difficult task for for bidding.
Yeah,
for
one more thing that I forgot, if you allow me, one more thing
please.
that I forgot to tell you, to share with you actually, is that for the state land, the connection price was negotiated between the government and the distribution company. So the investors before started with the bids, they know what will be the price for their connection to the market. So this was very important, because we know that the connection price is the highest uncertainty in the region, especially the distribution network. So sometimes the cost for the connection can be half of the investment or even more. So that was the reason why on the state land we had a positive auction.
Okay, thank you. I saw Tanvir's hand raised. Do you have question concerning this fixed premium and the negative?
Yes, Director, thank you very much.
Please be short if
thank
possible.
You.
Yes.
Thank you, Director, for giving me the time. Just I'd like to give my concentration, that is the two issues. First of all, that is contract for designing and the fixed premium, and second is the design criteria, including the penalty issues. My concept, that is, I am not the expert on, just I am working on it, and that is my PhD thesis is on these issues. So my opinion is that a country can follow, that is the first 3 or 4 years, that is the contract for designing process, and later from the 4th or 5th year they can follow the fixed premium issues. My opinion is that is if the country go for the first 3 years for contract for designing, that is they will help for zero premium payment. It will save the public money and a strong signal for the value of energy, and the RE generators can sell the energy directly to the wholesale market. And when after the 3rd year or the 4th year or 5th year, when they shift to the fixed premium, then it will help for stabilizing the revenues of the bidders and stable the revenues, lessening the risk premium, and that is the cost of capital, and ensuring the competition by engaging the small players. So this is my opinion about the CFD and the fixed premium. And one opinion is that is for including the proportionate penalty issue to the auction designing features. So if we include the penalty issues, proportionate penalties issues, that is if the producer is not go to up to this mark, then the proportionate level of penalty will be imposed. So it will help for higher realization rate of the auctioning process. This is my 2 inputs.
Thank you. Any comment from, because I think we stopped somewhere at Naida and Jose, so I don't know who would come first to give some reflection. Jose, I think no, Naida, let's please start with Naida and then
okay.
Jose. Okay.
Thanks, Laszlo. So I will not comment further on this fixed premium. I understand the question from Federation because they just adopted in September new law and selected fixed premium as a support, so maybe they can exchange with Alexander afterwards. Regarding the differences you mentioned between our contracting parties and member states, I mean, there are various differences. Of course, there are different socioeconomic situation. And Alexander, I think, mentioned this before. We have a quite low retail price for the consumers, and also because of the socioeconomic situation, we kind of want to design support to burden the consumers less than possible. Of course, this is the case in the EU as well, but in our case, we're thinking a lot what kind of support measures to introduce to support consumers to participate in the transition. And that's why I mentioned also possibly auctions for energy communities. But the biggest, I think, the difference and most important question when we're talking about the auctions and market-based support scheme is, as I mentioned before, market. So if we don't have market, it's very difficult to talk about market support schemes. And we don't have day-ahead markets and especially intraday markets, which are key for the balancing responsibility, which I don't know if it was mentioned before, but is one of the other key factors. Alexander said the connection cost, but balancing cost also is a big question mark for all investors. So in our case, because those markets are not in place, we had to support countries to come up with some kind of bridging solution, let's put it that way. So we introduced this conversion clausula in a couple of contracts, for example, in Albania, but also in Serbia regarding the balancing, and in Kosovo. So basically there is an auction, so bidders are still competing for the price. However, this price is initially basically the PPA with the off-taker, which will be at a certain point converted to the contract for difference once there's a liquid day-ahead market, and the full balancing responsibility will be taken once there's an intraday market. Now, the big question and still ongoing discussion is, what does it mean, liquid market? And Alexander also mentioned market coupling. This would be the clear confirmation that contracting parties have markets liquid enough to couple with the EU member states, but this have not happened yet in our contracting parties. So this is something we're still discussing, and the regulator is the body which should conclude and say, yes, now the market is liquid enough for producers to sell their electricity. On one hand, as I said, we are still happy that there are market-based support schemes, that there are auctions, so there is no administratively set feed-in tariff and no formula calculation, and the market actually defines the final price. However, we still have a lot of work to do on the establishment of the markets, and we hope our countries will speed up now. There are a couple of power exchanges established in Western Balkans recently. In Moldova, a colleague mentioned also the new law is adapted to enable market-based support schemes, so we are closely following developments. But I think this is the crucial for further deployment of auctions in our contracting parties.
Thank you very much, Naida, for raising this balancing cost issue as well, because that's quite important, and we see that for energy community countries, this is the real crucial issue in the future as well. And I saw, Jose, you wanted to contribute, so please, Jose, your turn now.
Yeah, so perhaps on this last point, I'm not an expert in the energy community countries, but all the comments that Alexander and Nadia mentioned seem very relevant to me. I mean, if you want to have a market exposure, you need the markets to be there. But I wanted to comment on Tamir's question, whether the use of contract for difference or feed-in premiums. So at the end of the day, all this is about providing support. So you provide state aid. So this will be approved in our case by DG Competition, analyzed, and what happens is you can design any support scheme to give you exactly the same results. So what's important for the investor is the expected net present value. So when it comes, it says, look, my expected net present value is going to be so much and so forth. So I will not go into this. I will not go on a market basis because I'm not able to have a positive expected net present value. So for that, I need some sort of support scheme, some sort of aid. So you can have either a one-way CFD, a two-way CFD, a feed-in premium, and they will all give you, from a perspective of DG you will always get the same result. The problem is all of this is expected. So even though the expected net present value of all these type of support schemes will be the same, what we know is the expected doesn't amount to, and it was Alta said, or Laszlo, you said, I mean, it's not exactly the reality. So we don't know how the market prices are going to evolve. So then when you have a feed-in premium, you're in a situation where we are talking now in Europe more and more about, well, we've seen what happened with the crisis, the energy crisis. So at some point, the prices peak massively. So a two-way CFD is a hedge for the state and also a hedge for the investor and this is the second point, in principle, on the future, at least in the EU, and we are seeing already this summer, we are seeing episodes of zero prices, a lot. So what we call the cannibalization. So the 2AC gives you this double hedge. It gives you the hedge for the state and consumers, and it gives you the hedge for the investor. On top of that, the most important thing is that, well, the most important thing, the initial thing which I mentioned is that you want to minimize how much public money is given. I mean, we want to incentivize, and Nadia mentioned it, private investments. We need private investments to go there. So everyone who wants to get there and invest and make a lot of money, please be my guest. Please do it. But the moment there's state money, which can be devoted to build schools or to build whatever, we need to be very careful. So we cannot have a situation where suddenly private investors go there and start making and tripling or quadrupling the profits. It cannot be there. So it needs to be a cap. And in that respect, the two-way contract for difference or the introduction of a clawback gives you that, while giving you the certainty that in an investment which is 20, 30 years long, or 15 to 30 years long, I mean, you are sure you're going to get your money back, because these are heavily capex based investments, which you do up front, and then you run to 20, 30 years to try to get the money back. So, and we see more and more that, and there's a lot of literature there about potential cannibalization and negative prices. So in that respect, the two-way CFD and the feed gives you, I mean, also you can construct the two-way CFD in a way which gives you a lot of risk, which is actually something which we are aiming at, but it gives you much more certainty that the feed-in premium will give you. The feed-in premium exposes you completely to the market. There's no hedge for the state, and there's no hedge for the private investor too. So.
Thank you very much, Jose, for this very nice summary. And just looking at the clock, what I would like to do is that I just merge the next two questions, and maybe that will be the last one, because it will be nice to finish at noon, because I know many people have to leave for another meeting. And just to make these other two questions merge in a sense, I would ask the following, is that what we see now is that auctions are there, but what we see on the market that the technologies are maturing, so costs are really coming down. However, in the last year we see a bit of volatility in the LCOE as well, but the long-term trend was that we see PV and wind prices coming down to a very competitive level, so they are maturing. On the other hand, what we saw due to the crisis, prices were going to very, very high level. Now we see a bit of normalization, but still prices are well above the prices we have seen before 2020, so above €100. So in this type of market situation, and that's a good question, that what are the expectations? So if you have a look at the 3-4 terms years, which you can look ahead, still it's above €80 per megawatt hour in most cases. Then the question is that, and then I think it was quite a nice introduction by Jose, is that what will be the role of auctions, mainly if we consider the CFD type of premium instruments and the PPAs. Who do you see these two tools? Because we see some people, some experts are telling that they are competing tools, and they have a competition. So either one of them or the other will be the winning form of providing support for the renewables if it's needed, or they can work together, they can go in parallel. What is your take on this PPA versus government PPAs, mainly in CFD forms? What will be the future in that sense? Who do you see this? And maybe if you have experienced, Naida or Alexander as well, that who do you see PPAs in relation of the energy community countries as well? And then let's go in that order as well, that maybe I give the first to Naida, then Alexander, and then the other two gentlemen. So Naida, please go ahead with this.
Thank you, Laszlo. I mean, first of all, I believe that there is still, as Jose said, need for the support by the government. But as I explained before, I believe it needs to be done structured compared to the achievement of the target and long-term plan of the state, where you're going, what you plan to achieve, and by which means, and what kind of support will come from the government, and where you see that the businesses might take an important role. On the other hand, I also believe that there is important role of this renewable PPAs or PPAs with utilities or the corporate PPAs. Actually, we in Energy Community Secretariat just launched the big project, 1-year project, to analyze the current situation in our contracting parties, because yet we have not witnessed so many corporate PPAs in our contracting parties. So we are analyzing the legal framework and regulatory framework, and we will come up with some proposals what is needed to enable this kind of contracts in our contracting parties. I think they have the same role as CFD, so they should provide the predictability and in the end, of course, the bankability of the project, so giving you the long-term price. What we see is one of the challenges, especially for the corporate PPAs, is that in our contracting parties, we still don't have a functioning market for guarantees of origin. We are still working with contracting parties on establishing systems, in national system for guarantees of origin, but also we are discussing recognition of guarantees of origin from contracting parties which are considered as third countries with the EU. I don't know if you're aware, but there is this restriction in Renewables Directive to recognize the guarantees of origin from our contracting parties in the EU. We expect actually tomorrow and on Friday, we have very important meetings here in Vienna. We have Ministerial Council. So we expect European Commission to propose the roadmap for recognition of guarantees of origin. On the other hand, our contracting parties still need to do their homework and finalize the implementation of proper systems. This is also, I think, key precondition for cross-border PPAs. And in regard to cross-border cooperation, we also a couple of years ago, jointly with ORES2 project, published a policy brief on potential cross-border cooperation, but this unfortunately have not yet been realized much between our contracting parties and the EU member states. So to summarize, I believe PPAs have a bright future in the EU for sure, and in our contracting parties as well, but we still need to create a proper framework and enable these contracts in energy community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess these are my final words. So just to thank you once again for the invitation, and looking forward to stay in contact with all of you.
Thank you very much, Naida. Alexander, maybe is the next.
Very short on the PPA, because I said a lot of things about the premiums. PPA are very interesting, but the problem are not the people that are here on this workshop. The problem are politicians. So for them
Please explain a bit more.
for them, look, if your position, it's completely different stories. So if you sign a contract with somebody on, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, 30 years and even more, if you are in opposition, you always will say that look, the price is not good. If you go with auction or on market, the price are lower now, and so on and so on. So
Okay.
yeah, as I said, I think that all of us are on the same side regarding the PPA, but what will be the price of the PPA is something that should be really good negotiated between not the investor, but between the political parties.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander. And maybe then let's do the order in the following day, that I give the floor to Jose first and then give to Alpha, and then you can even make the concluding remarks as well, if that's fine with you. So Jose, any thought on the PPAs and the possible competition with the...
Yeah, so very quickly on your first question, yes, I can think auctions can be used for all technologies. Obviously, I mean, okay, there's when you have novel technologies or small scale installations, there you can obviously exempt them, but in principle, for technology with certain amount of competition, because that's essential to have a proper competitive bidding. They are suitable, and they give you the lowest support. Then on the interaction between PPAs and CFDs, I'm aware of this debate. I mean, there are substitutes. Well, as I said before, I mean, in the subscription of some auctions, people say, well, I can make more money by going to the market. So that's fine. To me, they are complements, because the targets, I mean, it's not that we can allow ourselves to go little by little. Let's see when it comes. So we have massive targets. On top of that, you know, the more you have cannibalization in the market, then it's likely that you're going to be able to, you will sign a PPA, because I say, sorry, the prices are going down. Why on earth should I sign a PPA with you so that you get the money back from LCOE, your money back? So in principle, there you will need support schemes. So you need them both. And on top of that, PPAs are very important. First, and most important, to achieve the massive objectives we have, because it's not like an objective we put on paper like 42.5%. It's simply like the world, the time for the world is ticking. So, you know, we need this. But also, I mean, people, you will see a strong role of PPAs, because we have a number of companies. I mean, we all know the names. I'm not going to advertise them. But they want to get stability. They also say, look, yes, fine, yeah, your system has 60% renewables, but you know what? I want 100% renewable, because I'm fully committed. And even something I didn't think from a public point of view, these people simply say, I want to put that logo that I'm green in my horrendous product, because it's a horrendous and poisonous product, but I have a green logo. So that's good for the world. Okay, you'll eat, drink, or consume this poisonous product, but at least it will be green, because it gets green electricity. So, you know, this greenwashing incentives are there, and actually this could also help PPAs, which is actually fantastic. People want simply because they're committed, or because they want you know, it's a differentiating strategy. They want to make sure, look, I want 100%, and some people simply want it for greenwashing purposes. But for the sake of the argument, it works very well for us, because I mean, you will have more and more green electrons there.
Okay, thank you very much, Jose. And then I just give the floor to you, Alpha. So maybe you can just make a reflection on these, and maybe the concluding remarks can come as well, because we are just using the time quite.
Yeah, thank you very much, Laszlo. So with regard to the PPAs and the governmental auctions, I think it's one of the most important topics of the future. And I think that they will complement each other simultaneously and compete with each other, depending on the time horizon what you analyze. So if you analyze a given year or a given 2 or 3 years, probably the competing effects will be more stronger, in my opinion. So depending mainly on the price of the market, we will see probably more popular periods when the governmental auctions are more popular and periods when the market PPAs are more popular. But on the long run, because of these potential price changes, we can say they probably complement each other as the investors can shift between the two systems. However, I'm a little bit more pessimistic than Jose regarding the sufficiency of these measures in the future electricity system or energy systems, even with regard to these huge or very ambitious goals. So I see the constraints of both systems. So I think for the PPA, two main thing is required. One of that there is a good legislation system which allows to incorporate a project without interacting with the state or state entities not much. And the second issue is that on the buyer side, there are strong companies, which if I enter to the PPA contract as an investor of solar PV, for example, I believe that this company will be there for 10, 15 years and provide me a stable revenue, which is, I think, not necessarily the case in all countries, not even in the EU, but potentially not in the energy community contracting parties as well. So I think this buyer side is the bottleneck of PPAs and limits strongly the possible of how many contracting volume, how much capacities will be contracted to this system. And in the auctions, I think the limitation is that probably there will be some price caps and other market options. So there will, as we see in this current state, governments are in 2022 and 2024 were aiming significantly higher volumes than were actually contracted in the auctions, and they didn't really have the means to incentivize participants to enter into the systems. We see a lot of undersubscribed auctions, and I not really see the way that how it will be different in the future with a similar price environment. So it's my opinion only, but I think the goals may be probably only reached if some extent these projects are over subsidized and the price efficiency is put a little bit behind in the terms of goals relative to the goals to deploy more and more renewable capacities. But of course, it's a big topic and very debatable argument. So that would be my last comments about the PPAs. And as Laszlo said, we are already reached the noon, so the time to end this discussion. Maybe, Laszlo, what do you think if there is one question from the audience, because we didn't really provide opportunity for them to ask.
Let's take this question. I think that can fit in. One more question is all right.
Yeah, so if anyone has a question, please feel free to ask. Okay, I see it's no questions. Then thank you very much for everyone for participating in this workshop. As I said, the presentations and the whole recording will be available at REC webpage. We will send you a reminder and a link where to achieve these materials. And we hope that you will join our next workshops in this project, which will be somewhere around end of January. And we hope that we see you there as well. So thank you for all of the external and internal presenters, and have a pleasant day. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.